And I'll give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we'd like to thank the Secretary General for his report. For 7 months now in the Middle East, the acutest possible conflict is raging. It's claimed the lives of over 34,000 peace-loving citizens of Gaza. The spiral of escalation with each passing day is being wound tighter and tighter, involving more and more countries in the region. For the very first time in decades, the threat of a large-scale armed conflict looms large. Today's meeting is an excellent opportunity for us to assess what the international community has managed to do in order to resolve this crisis, and what it hasn't managed to do either. The first and most important thing is whether the Security Council demanded, as per its mandate, for the parties to immediately engage in a ceasefire. Indeed, yes, Resolution 2278, it de facto covered the period to the end of Ramadan, which is over. It did so, but it also called for a lasting and sustainable ceasefire. To get there, the Russian Federation and China had to veto the American draft resolution, the purpose of which was specifically to ensure that there was no ceasefire. Did the Council manage to control the implementation of this decision and to compel those who had ignored that decision to do so? Alas, no. This happened, did it happen because we didn't do enough? Such an assertion would be blatantly false. Starting on the 7th of October 2023, the Council worked day in, day out, discussing possible products geared towards ending the violence in Gaza. Delegations authored no less than 10 different draft resolutions, which I'm sure you'll agree is a fairly large number. As early as the 16th of October, the Russian Federation authored the first draft on the ceasefire in the Strip. It received a negative vote from France, the UK, the US, and Japan. The next draft was authored by Brazil, submitted on the 18th of October. The US was the only delegation to veto it, although it did contain, this is highly important, as our US colleagues are now telling us, highly important wording condemning Hamas. Just imagine how many lives we could have saved if these proposals received support at the time. This includes the lives of hostages, the release of which we also demanded. Since then, Washington has cast 3 more vetoes, preventing the Council from taking a decision which would have stopped Israel's military operation in Gaza. Our American colleagues did not conceal that they view the Security Council as a stumbling block, which shouldn't get in the way of their effective diplomacy on the ground. In actual fact, they did this to give their main Middle Eastern ally a free hand to clear out the enclave. We remember very well, and we hope other Security Council members do too, that the US delegation demanded the deletion of the mere mention of the necessity to stop the violence from all drafts. Colleagues, every US veto cast on Gaza, it's not just another statistic in the SC's history. We shouldn't forget that it has a frightful price. It comes with a specific, frightful price. The lives of thousands of peaceful citizens, people in Gaza. It took 6 months for Washington to at least realize that it has lost any means of influence over Israel. The tail is wagging the dog. Tel Aviv is dictating its conditions, demanding unconditional support from the US for all of its reckless decisions. Back then, in March, the US, which has been rebuked by practically the entire international community for all of its inhumane vetoes cast, the US tried to whitewash themselves, authoring a very strange draft resolution. In it, the US waxed philosophical, determining an imperative for a ceasefire without actually demanding one. At the same time, the resolution was chock-a-block with plants and mines, which de facto gave the green light for a further military operation conducted by Israel, including the clearing out of Rafah. As I said, together with China and Algeria, we couldn't let the Security Council to approve this license to kill further peaceful Palestinians. And thanks to this, the Security Council 3 days later adopted the aforementioned document authored by the E10, containing a demand for a ceasefire throughout Ramadan. Today, the US is disingenuously accusing Russia and China of vetoing its wonderful product. In reality, our veto was an example of why we need this instrument, the veto. At the same time, it also offers a response to all those calling for the veto's abolishment. It's necessary because we need to avoid the adoption of imbalanced and cunning decisions being promoted by Washington. Unfortunately, Israel is openly ignoring Resolution 2728, with the US's encouragement, which actually rushed to call this Security Council resolution non-binding. As a result, we have a situation whereby the UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, she's being compelled to recognize that Israel has met the threshold for the crime of genocide. She also characterized assertions by Israel's leadership about the fact that they're allegedly abiding by international humanitarian law, and also Israel's use of the right of self-defense and the fight against terrorism as pretexts. Ms. Albanese characterized these as humanitarian camouflage. I have a second question for you. Through our collective efforts, did we manage to improve the humanitarian situation in the enclave? The answer, again, is not in our favor. The Council adopted two humanitarian resolutions, 2712 and 2720. And yet, without a lasting ceasefire, these resolutions, as we warned everyone, remain dead letter. Humanitarian aid workers cannot do their job against the backdrop of active hostilities. These people are unarmed. Not only can they not help civilians, they can't actually defend themselves. We repeat that despite the disinformation being spread by the US, both of the aforementioned resolutions, just like Resolution 2728, contained measures for protecting humanitarian aid workers, and yet without a ceasefire, they cannot be implemented. Israel's clear-out of Gaza has already earned the dubious distinction of claiming the highest number of lives of humanitarian workers. Over 240 people have died, including 178 UNRWA staff. And this clear-out is not yet over. The Israeli military is hitting humanitarian convoys, blocking access, slowing the passage of supplies. And yet, Western states are only castigating Israel for these actions if Western citizens die as a result. All calls for deconfliction, which are based on the goodwill of field commanders, are empty. They won't actually do anything to change the dire situation of humanitarian aid workers on the ground unless we have a fully fledged ceasefire. The last question I'd like to put to you is this. Did the international community manage to prevent a spillover of the conflict throughout the region? The answer is, once again, no. The situation on the Lebanese-Israeli border is highly unstable. Lebanon and Syria are being subjected to Israeli bombing constantly. Our Western colleagues, specifically the US, the UK, and France, are to blame for the fact that the Security Council did not condemn Israel's strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus on the 1st of April, which would have reaffirmed this sacred basis of a sacred principle of international relations, the inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises and staff. This resulted in a new, highly dangerous uptick in regional escalation. The consequences are wholly unpredictable. Such disdain on the part of our Western colleagues to specific states and their rights, their division of the world into us and them, the us are above the law, the them, well, their lawful interests can be ignored. This has brought the Middle East to the brink of a large-scale war. This is what you call effective diplomacy. This is what it looks like. The fruit of it, the fruit it bears this time, each time this diplomacy is more victims and more destruction. By the way, another effect of this disdain is despite the clear demand of Algeria that we haven't managed to protect Palestinians from Israeli slaughter. We haven't been managed to end the spiral of violence. Not to mention the fact that since 1948, we haven't managed to help Palestinians secure a fully fledged state. The ambassador of Israel, in his statement, and in fact we knew what he was going to say before he said it, was disrespectful towards ministers from the region who are in the room today, Arab ministers and other ministers. For a long time now, the PR of Israel has managed to say awful things about UN staff, the SG, and today he called the Security Council the Terror Council. This is insulting. He forgot, probably, that the State of Israel was, in fact, established on the recommendation of the Security Council based on a General Assembly resolution. Do you want to cast doubt on this decision as well? Perhaps the Israeli ambassador will answer my question. Did Israel meet the criteria for membership when it was admitted to the UN? A short sideline about history. This is a letter from the chairman of the Committee on Admission of New Members to the President of the Security Council, dated 1948. It's a very short letter. I'm going to read it.
The Security Council Membership Committee has discussed Israel's application for admission to membership of the United Nations. As a result of its discussions, the committee came to the conclusion that it was not at present in possession of the requisite information to enable it to come to any decision. In particular, it was pointed out in the committee that the General Assembly itself had not yet reached any conclusion on the Palestinian question as a whole. The USSR and Ukrainian delegates declared, however, that for their part, they saw no reason whatever for delaying Israel's admission to the United Nations. The Syrian delegate, on the other hand, expressed his opposition to the application for admission and added that the application did not merit consideration. The Security Council Membership Committee has instructed me to apprise the Council of the above. The committee considers that it will be for the Security Council to decide at the proper time whether to refer the matter back to the committee or take a decision itself.
Then, on the 7th of March 1949, a letter from the President of the Security Council was drafted, transmitting the draft resolution on the admission of Israel. It was transmitted to the General Assembly. Therefore, the mere minimum we're compelled to do, based on all moral imperatives, is to satisfy Palestine's aspiration for UN membership. Palestine has walked a lengthy and agonizing path towards this point. Since 2012, it has enjoyed a singular status at the UN, a non-member observer state. It's one step away from permanent membership. We call on all Security Council members to vote in favor of the relevant draft resolution, which was put forward, as I said earlier, on behalf of the Arab States Group by Algeria. We're convinced that recognizing Palestine and its status on par with Israel will help the long-term settlement of the Palestine-Israeli conflict on the basis we all know well, an international legal basis endorsed by the UN and buttressed by the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. The goal being the establishment of an independent, contiguous, sovereign Palestinian state within 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, which would live side by side with Israel in peace and security. It's clear that to advance towards this goal, in addition to efforts which involve the resolution of the aforementioned acutest humanitarian issues, we also need the establishment of a collective diplomatic mechanism. We stand convinced that in such a mechanism, a key role should be played by countries from the region, Arab states, Islamic states. They understand no less, they probably understand better and more than others about how to achieve a fair solution which would be founded on a mutually agreed international legal basis. Of course, none of this should overshadow the immutable importance of a ceasefire as per Resolution 2728. If the resolution isn't implemented, the Security Council is within its rights to impose sanctions on those who violate and sabotage its decisions. We'll be reverting to this issue very soon. Thank you.
I thank